This is the final filmmaker conversation and the second last day of our digital premiere. I really want to thank everybody who has watched the film, come to our conversations, supported us. I can see already there are people here that have been to all 3 of these events. Thank you. We're really glad you're here. And I especially want to thank my mother, Myriam Shechter, for being here today, and of course also being in the film. I know that she doesn't enjoy being in the spotlight, which makes it especially wonderful that she agreed to be in the spotlight for us. And I also want to thank Siobhan Dunne, who's moderating. She is the editor of My So-Called Selfish Life. I don't know if you all know what an editor does. Basically, it is the most important role that I could possibly fill in making a documentary is the editor. And from the moment I met Siobhan, I knew that she was perfect. Really understood it, had a lot of really emotional connection to the work. And if you feel like this film is infused with a lot of joy and love, this is Siobhan. Siobhan has infused this film with so much love. And not to mention, if you think it flows really beautifully from beginning to end, from idea to idea, this is also Siobhan. So thank you very much, Siobhan. This would not be the film it is without you.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a very quick intro. Siobhan gave us a very short intro. Siobhan began her editing career as an assistant to the documentary filmmaker Frederick Weissman, and she has edited numerous documentaries and feature films. A native New Yorker, she is very fond of pizza, pigeons, and handball. And with that, I'm handing it over to you, Siobhan.
Well, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you both. You feel like family to me. What a journey. This film has been one of the greatest professional, personal experiences of my life. It really has just been wonderful. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And right back at you, as soon as we met, I was like, here we go. We are going to be on a ride together. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be great. And so thank you, Teresa. And with that, I would love to just give a little introduction to Myriam, starting with Myriam. Again, such a pleasure to be here with you. And Myriam Shechter started her musical education in her native Romania and completed it at the Rubin Academy of Music at the University of Tel Aviv. She specialized as a collaborative pianist and opera coach and has worked with many artists touring and recording in Israel, the United States, and Canada. After completing an MA in linguistics, that's some big brain stuff, everybody, at the University of Toronto, Myriam worked as a linguistics instructor at the University of Toronto and at York University, as well as doing research at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Myriam has lectured on classical music and opera for different venues, including the Royal Ontario Museum. She has collaborated with her husband, travel photographer and lecturer Robert Shechter, and has written extensively on travel for the Chicago Tribune, the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, and the Canadian Jewish News. Myriam is also very involved with the Aphasia Institute, where she is a longtime volunteer. Thank you so much for being here with us, Myriam. And now, Therese Shechter, the director. She's an award-winning filmmaker and the founder of the production company Trixie Films. Her work fuses humor, activism, and personal storytelling to disturb what's considered most sacred about womanhood. Teresa began her two decades-long film career as an intern at Robert De Niro's production company, Tribeca Productions. Since then, her documentaries have screened from Rio de Janeiro to Istanbul to Seoul, and her work is in the collections of hundreds of universities, nonprofits, and libraries. Frustrated by the lack of narratives that mirrored her own life, she creates films that use humor to explore a host of thorny questions around women's roles and destinies. This film is the third in a series of documentaries that includes I Was a Teenage Feminist and How to Lose Your Virginity. Thank you, Teresa, for being here. And thank you, everyone who was here joining us today and in some future iteration where we'll be preserved forever. And please put your questions in the Q&A if you have any as we go along. And with that, I think we'll get going. Does that sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
Excellent. So my first question to get us rolling is, this is Teresa's third film, as we said, or third in this series. And one of the first people she approached when making this film was Myriam to be in it and tell her story. And Myriam, when Teresa first came to you with this idea about the new film she was working on, how did you feel about it? And how did you feel about maybe being in it?
Well, we always supported her. She always had something very interesting and very valuable to share with a word. So we were very excited that she's making these films. How did I feel? I'm not a public person. I wasn't excited about being in the films. I thought first she just wanted me to play the piano, which is easy, but she wanted me to talk as well, which was hard. But you know, I'll do anything for my daughter, so I sacrificed myself, and I was in it. But we are very, very proud of her achievements. I think it's a great film.
Um, Thank you. I just want to add that my mother, this is not the first of my films that my mother has been in. She was in my very, very first ever documentary, I Was a Teenage Feminist. So this is a repeat engagement for my mother being in another film.
Only I didn't know I was in your film then. I thought you were just practicing.
I was just practicing, but.
And I was in the kitchen preparing for Passover. Later on, I found out what you did.
Well, here's the thing. I had never used a video camera before, and I was starting my very first documentary, and I wanted to sort of practice using this video camera. And so I decided, I was home in Toronto visiting, and I decided I would interview my mother about feminism. And we shot a lot of stuff, and it turned out to be incredibly wonderful, as you can imagine. And it is throughout that film. And it looks terrible, like a cinematographer would just lose their minds at how bad it looks. But it doesn't matter because the conversation is so good.
Amazing. Well, one of the, you know, the first, when we began this film, putting it together, the first thing, when I first started cutting it and I was talking to Theresa, the first thing I jumped into, because it was such a big topic and it was pretty intimidating, I think, for both of us and for me, you know, how are we going to tell this story and shape all of this, knowing it has so many different threads. One of the first areas I went to was the shoot that Theresa did with you, because and throughout the editing process, it was sort of a North Star. Whenever I would be stuck, I would go back to that interview, what happened there, the rapport between the two of you, because it was so beautiful. And we always knew when we first started this that we wanted this to be a really positive film, not a film that complained and was so angry, but a film that was celebrating all that women can be if they're given the opportunity to make the best choices for their lives. And we wanted it to be fun and not exclude anyone. And your interview and your time together really encapsulated that so beautifully. So the first thing I jumped into when Theresa said, start where you want, what feels right? I said, oh my God, I'm going to the shoot with your mom, because it was so infused with love and understanding and everything we wanted to bring to the movie. And, you know, from the very jump, we know that the first person Theresa, or one of the first people she told about this for herself, was you. And you tell us that, and you do it with laughter, and you're like, okay, you know, and we wanted that to carry through. And it comes up again and again in the tough decisions you had to make. So thank you for that, and for being the sort of anchor, the spine of the film in a lot of ways comes back to you. And in that first story, well, actually it's the second story. The first story you talk about Mother's Day and how you felt about that and didn't appreciate it as a holiday because it excluded so many women. Actually, why don't we talk about that a little bit, about growing up with that, and Theresa and you growing up with that idea that your mom already was drawing your awareness towards all women and not sort of dividing them in mothers, you know, as mothers and non-mothers, and how maybe that influenced you growing up.
I just thought we were a weird family because we weren't celebrating Mother's Day. I just thought it was, I mean, not in a bad way, but we were definitely odd. And it was weird not celebrating Mother's Day when everybody around us was. But as I got older, I appreciated the sentiments behind why we did not. Aside from the fact that my family is from Europe and they didn't have Mother's Day, they did have International Women's Day, which my mother can definitely talk about because it didn't make it into the film. So that's kind of how I felt, basically.
So it was some sort of weird, you know, foreign kind of holiday to you, Myriam. When you first heard about it, you hadn't heard of such a thing. It was like a new concept to you?
Well, yes, because I grew up under communism, when I already was aware of what's happening around me. I mean, and March 8th was always a very big holiday, celebrating all the women, all the achievements of the women. And one thing I must say about communist time that I spent, that women felt equal. You know, you could do any profession, you could learn anything you wanted to do, and you were celebrated March 8th. And whether you had children or not, that wasn't the main issue. The main issue was yourself, the woman. what do you achieve as a woman? And when we came to Canada and we got to the first Mother's Day, I said, what is this? What kind of holiday is this? I mean, only mothers, so the rest doesn't count. How is this? I think at the time I was also thinking that I have two daughters. We have two daughters, Therese and Andrea. And Andrea has children, Therese doesn't. So Andrea, of course, is very valuable. She's an exceptional person, as we all know. And she also has children, which is nice. And Teresa doesn't have children. She's also an exceptional person. So we don't celebrate her, right? Doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. You still buy chocolates and flowers at Mother's Day. It's okay. Good for the economy. Does it
And Mother's Day is originally a commercial, well, turned into a very commercial holiday. It wasn't meant for that.
Right,
originally.
right.
But that's what happens in capitalism.
Yeah.
And so then, as that ties into one of the incredibly poignant scenes in the film where you talk to Teresa about your choice to have a baby. And I mean, we can talk a minute about why that scene is so, it's not only is it moving and beautiful, but also it really, so many people mention it because, oh my Lord, you were accused of being selfish because you wanted a child. So really it holds it up to the spotlight and says a woman who is selfish is a woman who is making choices for herself. That's what makes her selfish. Not about I want this, I don't want that. It's about not doing something that you know is right for you rather than what the community is saying is really best for them or that they want or is most useful. So where did you find the resources to do that? At that time, you were so young and it was such a crazy time and so much upheaval for you. And yet you were able to do it. Do you know how you were able to do it? It's kind of a weird question, but.
Yeah, you are able to do it because you don't think too much. You know, things happen, life goes on, and you don't worry so much about what you should or shouldn't do. Also, as I mentioned in the movie, I didn't know I was pregnant when we arrived to Israel. We left Romania. Luckily, very good timing. If I would have known that I was pregnant at that time in Romania, I would have had an abortion right away without thinking, because after 2.5 years of marriage, you still didn't have a place to live together. So the baby would have been on the street between the two of us or something. So when there were a few things that made me decide. I never thought, I can't wait to have children. It happened. Okay? When you get married, these things happen. And there were a few signs. I'm a bit of a fatalistic person and maybe a little bit superstitious even, not religious though. And when we arrived in Israel, to a new life and a new country, first thing I found out that I was pregnant. And it looked like a sign. This is your new life. You look at it differently now. And the other thing was that we got a connection right away. I knew her. I never talked about a boy or anything because I knew she was a girl. And we became very attached to each other, I think. So there she is.
Wow. And you grew up somewhere where abortion was part of healthcare though. That was never, you didn't live in a place where there was this stigma and all this narratives around abortion, and you grew up someplace where it was considered healthcare.
No, it was healthcare. You could have an abortion, free, of course, because health was free. And that was like that until Ceausescu came. I think everybody knows the terrible name of Ceausescu. We were not in the country by then anymore. And he decided he wanted to repopulate the country. He didn't think there were enough people, and abortion and contraception were closed. And then came the orphanages. Everybody knew about the horrible orphanages in Romania. Many kids were adopted from them because Ceausescu decided there is no more, women have no more control over their lives. They just have to have children. And families couldn't support so many children. So, yeah.
This is one of the things that Margaret Atwood said she looked to when she was writing Handmaid's Tale. She said nothing in the book hasn't already happened. And she was very influenced by what had been happening in Romania at that time, which is in the, I think, 70s and 80s, I believe is the era.
Yeah.
And also there are a lot of people in orphanages, but also a lot of women died from illegal abortions. A lot of women died. So that's what happens when you take away women's rights to control their own bodies and institute forced pregnancy and forced childbirth. It's a lovely sunny day out here, but I'm going to talk about this anyway. This is a real life example, wanting to control your population by controlling their reproduction. This is a real thing, and it happens, and it's happened many times.
And one of the beautiful ways that you are with us throughout the film, not just when you're being interviewed, is your music, which comes in some of the most beautiful moments of the film. It's sort of a reprieve and gives us a little space to digest a lot of what's happened. And was that one of your first careers, was as a musician? Or I know that wasn't necessarily your chosen career.
Well, I started piano lessons when I was 5 during the war. That's another story. I don't think we have time for that now. And we have music in the family. We have musicians. And also from a young age, our parents took us to the opera and to concerts. So we grew up with that. And it was accepted naturally that, and also looking forward, my mother's point of view, that it was a good career to have under communism. It was well paid and appreciated. So without asking me what do I want, my career was done. I went to music school and everything, hoping all the time that I can get out of it because I like more math and physics and stuff like that. And I got sent to a job. You didn't choose a job as an opera coach in another town, which I accepted. And that moment it became my career. And then I went on to university and all that. And it stayed my career with short breaks to study linguistics and other things, but it's always been with music, and I'm very glad I have it.
As are we, because it was a wonderful, just beautiful in the film. And also you bring so many of the themes together. We got to talk about the cats. I mean, you bring in one of the stars, Georgie, rest in peace. He has since transitioned on, but you give us so many priceless gems with I think is it your mother-in-law who says, you only look at cats, you never look at babies. You're not going to have, amazing again though, right? People deciding you're a woman that looks like she's going to have children behaves this way, or a woman who doesn't behaves a certain way. And, you were always sort of, defying maybe people's expectations, which is also a wonderful, example.
Yeah. But I think this is really ties in beautifully with the film that I was considered selfish having a baby. Mm-hmm. Because that was not the time to have a baby. And I've been told, this is selfish, you should go and work as a secretary and all that. I also wanted to go back to school. So I was officially a selfish person. Mm-hmm. And thinking back, I don't think we ever discussed it. My mother was also a selfish person because you don't know that about your grandmother. Because she brought me on this world at a time when nobody had children anymore. The war was starting, the Nazis being a Jewish family, you don't want to have too many children around. And everybody, my generation, had only one child, if they had children. Nobody had two children except if they were twins. And I don't think my mother was very much admired for doing this. It was a selfish thing. So there we continue the line of selfishness.
I always wondered about this because my mother's born in 1938. And if you could imagine being in Europe, especially being a Jewish family in Europe.
Very bad timing.
Yeah, I mean, you get it. You all get it. Yeah. I've always been amazed at that. But even my father, who was born in 1936, also.
I think by the time I wasn't that bad as 38. It was getting worse and worse. And people knew it was coming. Yeah. And talking about your father, because we're talking about selfishness and all that stuff, he was very young when he found out I was pregnant. He was 24. And also starting a new life in a new country. And he was totally supportive. Totally. Not because was his choice, he respected my choice. And I know he was a wonderful father to continue another direction and taking over.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because I say this a lot in interviews, that I have a wonderful mother and everyone wants to talk about my mother, but I also have a wonderful father, a really wonderful father who has been a wonderful father and influence. And he made us breakfast every single morning. And still when we visit, he makes the best coffee in the morning. And he's there. I was going to ask if he wanted to come and just wave just behind my mother for a moment, just so you all know that I have a father. He exists and he's lovely. So I know he's in the next room. So let's see if that happens. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Yay!
Greetings, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for
Hi.
including me. Hi.
Hi.
It's going exceptionally well.
Andrea is writing handwriting. That's a
Right.
family affair here.
This is a family affair here. Yes.
What?
Well,
All right.
the beautiful, we focus especially on this film. There's a lot of really difficult stuff so many women have to deal with, but there's that also incredible romance and love to your story and how you escaped together with each other, and you knew you wouldn't be, there was no future for you even if you were married, and it seemed that the poignancy of the beginning of your journey, leaving Romania, going to Israel on this boat, and then the way you speak about each other and how he supported you in your decision, and you trusted one another in these ways to do this, which is really it's just incredible. And it's amazing, and really a big part of it. To me, the big part of that story is those early photographs of you together, and you left home, you knew you had to leave or there was no future, and
We had to leave. But the reason we got married so young was because if you applied for a passport in Romania, they didn't call it, we didn't know the word passport. The word passport didn't exist because nobody ever went anywhere. If we applied to leave the country, you become a non-person. So you don't have any more rights and you don't have a future, really. And we got married one day before we applied for that. So in case they let us go, which was never sure, they let us go together. But we knew the apartment is not forthcoming or anything like that. So we lived separately. But we did manage to live together, and some people did not because they got married after they applied to leave. And it took only 3 years to let us leave. And from the first time we applied in 1948, it took much more than that. But we did leave. And I think, Therese, you tell us sometimes, thank you for leaving Romania.
Yeah. I might also add thank you for leaving Israel, but basically I'm just happy to have grown up in Canada. It's a good place to grow up, honestly.
absolutely. Let's see, how are we for time? Okay, we're okay for our, we're not going to do our Q&A yet, right? We have a few more minutes to just keep chatting.
We're very good.
Excellent. So I'll go back to when Therese and I were making this movie, and the editing and integrating all of the different pieces. In the final act of the film, one of the last times we really have an in-depth talk with you is when we go into maternal regret, and you have this conversation around regret and not regretting, which kicks us into one of the more thorny issues of the film, which always gets a lot of attention, and people are very curious, understandably, because it's still sort of very taboo in our culture that this could happen. When you were talking about that, and just to sort of expand on this notion, I'm sure in your experience, well, I don't want to say I'm sure, but that you have known of this, in your own life, in your own generations of women who maybe had children and it wasn't the best for them, and when Theresa brought this topic up, do you have any further thoughts on that, on motherhood regret and how it's handled these days? I don't know, it's kind of a heavy question, but.
Me, or are you asking Therese about that?
Maybe I'll actually kick that one to Theresa, and then we can. No?
Yes. No, I think yes.
Okay.
The question she has to ask, not me.
No, well, this is really interesting. I'm going to take this somewhere you're not expecting. One thing that I grew up thinking, which I know I've been wrong, I'm wrong thinking it, but it was combined with my own ideas about having children and how that would sort of limit my life. And I was a very ambitious person. I wanted to do a lot of things in my life. And I felt like even getting married and having children was going to really curtail that in a significant way. And I think if I'd really wanted children, I would have just had children anyway, but I didn't want children. And I wanted to do a lot of things in this world. So I projected that on my mother. I projected on my mother this thing like, oh, if she hadn't have had me, she could have done all these fabulous things if she wasn't tied down with a baby. This is completely my projection. I never thought that I never got that feeling ever. I want to be super clear about that. But it was my own feelings about parenthood and motherhood combined with, like, anyway, so we've had this conversation, Mom, right, about this. And so I guess that's what I have to say about regret, that I projected my own presumed regret, which I think would have not just been presumed, would have been definitely regret, onto the story of me and my mother. And that is why I loved having the conversation with you about this, about what happened and the choice that you made a conscious choice, and you were able to make a conscious choice and you did not regret it. And I always, when I think about regret, we'll always regret something we didn't do. There's always an unknown path, when you make a choice, always. But if you're making the best choice for yourself at the time that you're going to make this choice, I think that's all we can really ask for as complicated human beings, is to make the best choice at that time for ourselves. So that's mine.
And Therese and I talked throughout, making this film was like therapy, was work, it was so intense. We would have days where we would just be trying to let land just the history of women, and how so much violence has been put on them throughout the span of history in the building of civilizations, and just sort of coming to terms with that. And I think for us, and reflecting on our moms, just that one generation and what the choices we've had, we were raised somewhat differently, but we both have immigrant parents, and just, trying to make peace with here we are and all that we have and what our mothers have gone through and the choices they were able to make, weren't allowed to make. I'm very close with my mom. She's been an incredible, exemplary person in my life. I have led, I love her to pieces, and she has done so much for me and made, worked so hard and just gave me an incredible life, but just reckoning with the choices she didn't have with the choices that I have. And I think that happens, that projection, of like, oh my God, how did they do it? How, we are sort of in awe of so many of the generations behind us. And yet here we go again into this clamping down on our ability to think for ourselves and make the choices that are right for our bodies. And I think so many of the people in the film, particularly of the older generations, I think I saw Molly here with us today, these women who have been fighting for this, who first had access to birth control, who could first think about this. And it's just poignant, this how long this has been going on for women to be able to choose what they want to do with their bodies. It's really, and it's a lot for those of us who feel we've been given so much and have a lot more freedom than they had in just, these one generation. So thank you. And to all the people out there, all the women out there, thank you. So, okay, moving on.
Can I ask my mother a question?
Of course.
I think that when I had told you legendarily now that I wasn't going to have children, and it was my sister Andrea's job, which she did magnificently, by the way, the response was very supportive, obviously, from the whole family. And I think that there are a lot of people who don't have that kind of support from their families. And I always wonder, what can we say to people who don't have the support of their families? How can they move forward in their lives amongst this, the pressure, or how can they speak to their families and explain to them what's going on and why they really need this support?
I think you answered yourself. How do you speak to your family? Depends on the family. Some families will be receptive, and some family will, won't like at all the idea to talk about that. my concept was that, okay, first of all, coming back on something that Siobhan said, yes, I had children. I have children, two of them. And hi, Andrea. And I still could have my life. I had my life. I was working when we came, too much because we had too many debts, but I was working. And when I wanted to go back to school, I could do that and continued working and going to school. I didn't feel, I felt sometimes that I've been neglecting my children. I hope not, but I know that during the day I was also doing my music and cooking and everything. And my studying was during the night because that was the only time which was mine. But I had a life. I still have a life, you know? So it depends how your family is like. And I knew what's important for you at that time. So we understood it was your decision. I think one of the things that angers me so much in this whole situation is when people make decisions for you. They decide what's best for you. Just listen to me. I know what's good for you. You should know what's good for yourself. And if you go the wrong way, you'll find out and you'll find another way. But it's your decision. Because, remember when I wanted you to go to university, you got all these scholarships, and I wanted to study genetics because I thought that's the future, and you are so good in school and so smart, you could have done anything, and then you wanted to do art. So I said, fine, it's your life.
And you wanted to do art.
My mother, ladies and gentlemen.
But it's your life, and I said, if you like it, it's fine. Not that I don't like art, I do. And if you want to change, you can change later on. And if you like what you are doing, go ahead and do it. Who am I to tell you that I know better than you what you want to do with your life?
I think there's a vast population of people that would be very happy to tell their kids that they know best what's best for them. So even their adult kids. So Thank you for not. But yes, it's true. I was good in school. I was good in math and science. I've always wanted to be an artist since I was like 6 years old, longer than probably I was thinking about whether I was going to have kids or not. I knew that I wanted to do art. And my parents really did want me to be a geneticist. And you called it because it is the career of the future. So had I become a geneticist, I would have probably done very well for myself, but I would have been so unhappy and bored. I can just, nothing against geneticists because you probably love it and that's why you went into it. For me, that was not
only a suggestion.
It was a suggestion. It was a good one though. But anyway, yeah, I recognize how lucky I am really that I did have this support. I gave up scholarships, university scholarships, so I could go to the art school I wanted to go to. Yeah, I mean, all of it. So I think that in other situations, I wouldn't have had that much support or freedom.
I remember I went with you to your first interview, I think, at the College of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping so much that you would succeed, and you did. So it's your life.
Yep, yeah. It is.
And you've had a couple of careers yourself, Teresa, wouldn't you say? I mean,
yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up because again, my parents are such role models for this. My mother studied music, became a musician, very accomplished pianist, among other things, and then became a linguist. And then she began writing and she began doing travel writing. And I saw how a life could be lived where you could pivot from one thing to another. You could follow interests you have and they may lead to a new career. They may not, but they may. And I've watched this with my father also, who had a very good communist job. He was an engineer, which is another really, I'm told that engineering was a great profession to go into because you wouldn't be sent to the country because that was under the control of whoever would send you wherever to do your job. And if you were an engineer, chances are you could stay in the city. But then he became an engineer, which was a great profession. And then he became a college professor teaching engineering. And then he went back to what had been his great love as a hobby, became a professional photographer. and seeing my parents do that and feel like they could make these changes to follow their own loves and interests, I think really did make a big difference. And yes, I was a graphic designer for a long time. I worked for newspapers for a long time as an art director. And then at some point in my late 30s, I thought, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I think I want to go to film school. It wasn't that easy, but anyway, I did go to film school. And moved to New York and started making films here. And I think, again, this sort of like this modeling this kind of behavior that makes you curious and makes you open to things and makes you not afraid to occasionally take a risk, because you have support under you, of one kind or another. That's really important, just having that. So yeah.
Yeah, we have the other
Why I'm here.
sister.
Hmm?
Your sister was a talented violinist, Andrea. And of course, great, that's a career. That's what she's going to do with her life. And Andrea did not want to have this as a career and said, fine. And she ended up studying many other things. And she's fantastic at her job. She's a volunteer coordinator and much, much more than that. And also she teaches all the possible, I don't know what they are, Pilates and swimming and everything, all the physical exercises possible. Very successful, a good mother. She has great kids and nice husband. And guess what? She returned to her violin after all that. She's back. She's playing in an orchestra, enjoying it. So your life, there are many, many avenues and many possibilities, and you just have to go and get them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to say, not everybody is in a position to do that, of course. So it's not just like, let's just go do this sometimes for some people, but I think keeping that as a goal, as a possibility, instead of just assuming you just can't, is a wonderful thing.
Well, Teresa, neither one of us just went another way and stopped with the other before, because we had to make a living. So at one point,
Yes, we'll have to
you're going on parallel.
Yeah.
Your bets and also have something that you enjoy doing.
I never stopped being a graphic designer because I still had to make a living, because picking documentaries is a net loss, basically. So I've never stopped doing graphic design. So I think that's a really good point. I didn't just transition and now I'm a filmmaker. I'm doing that thing I used to be doing as well. So
It's always an extra layer.
Yeah.
Not a change. Add another layer.
add another layer.
Excellent. I think maybe we'll move on over to some questions. How does that sound from our audience? We have one here for Teresa, which asks, have you ever felt resentment from your friends who have children for the choice of being a child-free person, as if your choice attacks their choice, or that people get very defensive, beyond the eye roll? How could you? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And thanks, Kimberly, for that question. And I'm just looking at it now and I'm seeing also that question of, why are you celebrating your child-free choice? And it's true that I have sometimes encountered this feeling of defensiveness, where I have made a certain choice. I'm happy with that choice. I'm happy with my life. And I have sensed a defensiveness on the part of another person who felt like, because I was happy doing what I was doing, I was sort of attacking their own choices, which is unfortunate, because I'm not. My life is my life. Your life is your life. I was told, though, by a friend who is a mother, she said to me, actually, mothers spend so much more time picking on other mothers, so don't worry about it. I don't know if that's true. Maybe the mothers here can weigh in on that.
Yeah.
but yeah, the things that I felt the strongest was not so much that, but feeling alien in every environment I was in. I just felt so alien. I would go to a baby shower and I was the only one who wasn't like planning to have one, basically. And it definitely put me outside the circle of what was happening. If you're Sex and the City fans, I think the baby shower episode is one of the great episodes in that series, where they all go to a friend's baby shower. It was a very alienating experience. Same with bridal showers. I didn't get married till I was 47. So going to weddings and bridal showers was also alienating. You know, it's hard to be on the path nobody else is on. It just is. It can be lonely, it can be difficult. And I feel like we should all try to find empathy and compassion for the choices other people make and try to understand what their lives look like, just as I hope people would try to understand what my life looks like, and also understand that it's actually a very happy, joyous life.
Yeah, and you know, one of the funny things or interesting things I've gotten with that, in terms of talking about it or pushing back or saying, you know, or drawing someone's attention that maybe it's not the best icebreaker. So you have kids, you know, and friends who have gotten annoyed at me, not because I'm child free but they're like, well, what do you want me to say when I'm at that conference? I can't, like, it's this comfort zone, and they resent not my child freeness, but that I'm saying, you know, maybe that's a little presumptuous to start a conversation that way, or however especially if you're totally expecting that person to say yes, and you have a total idea of how that conversation is going. Me too. Here are the pictures. Na 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 na. And it's just this comfort zone that strangers can fall into, particularly professionally. And if they don't have that, well, what are you going to say to, you know? And it's well, I guess you have to find some other potential connection. But that I've gotten it a number of times. And they're like, oh, well, you can be child free, but please don't take my easy conversation piece away with someone I don't really want to talk to, you know?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just that then we have to work a little harder to get to know each other on a perhaps a more genuine level, or not, I don't know. But
so I don't know if everyone's familiar with the great Amy Blackstone, who has been really a mentor and role model for me in this area of child-free life. She's wonderful. If you don't know Amy, please look her up, Amy Blackstone. She wrote a great book called Child Free by Choice. Amy dealt with this all the time, like going to parties and immediately somebody would, and she was married and she and her husband, oh, so you have kids, how many kids do you have? She would say something like, what's your favorite food? Like she would say things like that were very disarming, and everyone likes to talk about food mostly, right? You know, she would ask these very disarming conversations, or what kind of music do you like, or, you know, whatever. And I remember I met someone famous who shall remain nameless, and I'm very bad with famous people because I become like an idiot. And in fact, she said to me, hi, it's nice to meet you. I love your earrings. Where did you get them? And I thought, this is genius. This is absolute genius to ask me about my earrings, because it suddenly just sort of put us in the same plane. We're talking about earrings. So I think those things can be really helpful. I did not know these tricks back when I was getting the worst of it, but yeah, those are sort of nice tricks. Just, you know, we all have things in common in some way or another, and just like go to that thing right away. Don't even worry about it. So
exactly,
that's my tip.
Yeah,
I hope that's helpful, Kimberly.
Okay. Anybody else? Be sure to put your questions in the question and answer section. Let's see. And so now we've done my so-called selfish life. Here we are bringing it out to the world. And of course, I think a lot of people want to know what might be next for Trixie Films. No, she's like, Siobhan, shut up.
I would like to know.
What's next?
What are you thinking about? Maybe potentially.
I'm very happy to answer that question, but first, I noticed some great things in the chat that I wanted to share with some people.
Oh, sure.
Mindy, who is actually our cousin, saying that people were surprised that she got married and had children. She had so many things going on. Settling down was not an option. She traveled, she earned 2 degrees, had more than one career, all of which were supported by her mother and her husband. And her mother kept people in check that didn't support her. So I think that's very nice. Everyone needs an ally. I also wanted to go to something Bonnie was saying. Bonnie is a great supporter of not just this film, but all of my work, actually. I want to recognize her. We can see your hand, Ed. That's my husband's hand right there. So Bonnie writes, my mother never forgave me for not following her example and being a housewife and mother. It extended to not recognizing my PhD, which I know this story, and that kind of thing makes me really sad. I don't know if other people have had that experience and how they may have handled it. So just wanted to acknowledge those 2 comments. What's next for Trixie Films? I don't know. We have a lot of work to do getting the film out. So we're just finishing now with our special streaming portion, which has been absolutely amazing. And I have to thank everyone for the notes and the Instagram stories and everything. Just, you've been so lovely sharing your experiences with the film and your life. So we're finishing that. Think of this as the theatrical release. And we're going to be really focusing on getting the film to schools, to companies, to nonprofits, getting it out to larger groups where we can talk to larger groups about these issues, especially young people who, many of whom we have found don't know that you have a choice whether or not to have children. And this is a really sort of staggering thing that we realized when we were doing test screenings with young people, which was, they were like, oh, I have a choice. So we have some work to do. And I'm really looking forward to that part of it, because I love nothing more than talking to college classes. We have plans down the road for television and streaming, but they're down the road because reaching our audience directly right now is really the strongest thing we can do. So if you're a professor, if you have a nonprofit, if you have a company that wants to expand their diversity, equity, and inclusions programs, I'm just giving you the big plug right here. Please get in touch with us at myselfishlife.com, because there's a lot of work to do. And I know that there are a lot of people who want to see the change and be the change, and we are here to help you to do that. Past that, I don't know. I've been thinking of retiring, you guys. What do you think? Making documentaries is really hard work. And I'm sort of thinking, well, maybe I can just retire, do something else, become a graphic designer full time. Because man, that work is so much easier than making documentaries. I can't even tell you. And people pay you, which is kind of a great idea, right? So, and if not, I might make another film. I need to write myself a letter, seal it in an envelope, and say, in case of the urge to make another film, please read this first.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see what happens.
And you know, Theresa, just to follow up on that, one of the things that I know we talked about while making this film was when I would be out socializing, you know, and people would ask me what I'm working on, and I would mention this film, the reaction was always astounding, because so many people had never thought of this being a movie. But then when you mention it, particularly to women, particularly to child-free women, or not necessarily exclusively, but certainly when I would encounter other women, the desire, the awe that it was actually going to be made for something that they wanted, so that they really were like, I always wanted someone to make that film, but I never thought they would. You know, it's a topic so many people don't really know that they even find interesting, which has also been certainly a revelatory with this as the movies come out into the world, and the reactions we've gotten, particularly from a lot of men, dads, who just have, you know, the comments like, I never knew this was an issue. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know this was a thing. This is so interesting. I never knew about this. And from women as well, who just, you know, who just never really were able to think about it as a thing in and of itself, which is really, really fascinating. So I mention that because if someone is pitch the idea of watching this movie wherever it might seem appropriate, because you'll be amazed at the reactions you'll get. With, it's not obvious, and then yet it's a movie about this thing that people don't really recognize as a thing until you watch it, and then your head's kind of exploded. So I'll just say that. I see we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Let's see here. The other piece of this conversation is from the mother's point of view. I'm thinking of the mother of a child-free person. While we are supportive of our adult child's choice, it is also a personal loss for us and something we had thought of or dreamed of for many years. It's also excluding us from our group of friends who are all now grandparents. While you feel excluded from your groups, we do as well, but just not our choice.
Yeah, this is a long question, and it gets complicated at the end. I don't really get exactly what the end of the sentence is about.
But it's not our choice. They're being excluded for a choice they didn't make. That's the part that throws you a bit.
Yeah, it's I still believe it's a choice of our children. I never thought that I was wiser or better at making decisions for my children than they were themselves. Maybe because being an immigrant, we lived in different worlds. I lived in a different world than my children are living in a different world. And I think they know better what they want. I don't think it's, and they were right in what they decided to do. I'm not sure this answers the question, because I didn't understand the question totally.
I can jump in for a sec. All right.
What?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you, the person who's asking this question. I feel you. It's a natural reaction to look forward to something like being a grandparent, and then I am told it is a joyous thing, and then have it not happen. I mean, I understand that great disappointment and how hard it must be around others who are having these experiences and joys, and pull out the pictures of their grandchildren. And I've talked about this with other people. So I want to validate your feelings of feeling excluded and sad and a little out of control maybe of the situation. And I think you know what I'm going to say. Ultimately, it's the decision of whoever is going to be carrying, birthing, raising, parenting the children, whether or not they're going to have those children. And it just kind of comes down to that. You can't really, and I'm not suggesting you are forcing anyone to have children, but you know, it's someone else's life. And if they don't want to have kids, I'm sorry to say you're not going to have grandchildren. And yeah, I just don't think we can force other people into lives they don't want. And that goes for having children and not having children.
Yes.
We also can't force people into not having children if they want them. I have a lot of problems with people who say that population is too big, everyone should stop having children. You're all, you know, I don't buy that either.
It's an idea.
Yeah, an idea. But I don't buy, I mean, we can't be prescriptive about this stuff.
What I want to add to that, between our children and us, we are a generation apart. Never mind a word apart for us, because we are also immigrants, but we are a generation apart. And I noticed quite often that my own mother was very mad at me for different things that I was doing or not doing with the children, because they weren't being done in her time, or they were being done differently. And that made me, I'm using a very hard word, made me suffer, because I've been told that I'm not a good mother, and I don't know what to do with the children, and this is not the way to raise children, because I wasn't doing exactly what she was doing with us 30 years before. So looking forward to the present time, we have to acknowledge we are a different generation. How can we tell them what to do? They are going to live that life, not us. If they're going to have children, fine. If they're not going to have children, fine. It's their life, not our life. Their life doesn't have to depend on what we need in our life. Like, I want grandchildren, therefore you have to live this particular life because I want grandchildren, or the other way around. Okay? It's your time to decide what you want.
I saw that Diane here in the chat says that's how she feels. Diane, feel free to drop something in the Q&A if you want to talk more about that you share the experience with the person who asked a question.
And also just to, I think as to allow yourself, to grieve that. You had an idea of what your life might look like, and it didn't, which is not a totally uncommon experience for so many people. You thought and it didn't happen, and you feel a loss, and you can allow yourself to grieve that, and also realize hopefully your community of friends might be a little more supportive and understanding, and rather than talk about, push you on what you don't have, all that you do, not to be really corny, but hopefully that will become a barrier between you and your child and your relationship, and to see and to respect and thank everyone that they were able to make those choices for themselves and had the healthcare and the ability to do it, even though it's also painful. And, hopefully your community, you'll find other people in your community and be a little bit more supportive, because that's absolutely it. That exclusion, it's just a yucky feeling when and that's hard, no. So to allow yourself to feel that and move through it a little bit.
And just a quick response from the person who asked the question. Thank you. I'm glad that was a good answer for you. They write, 2 things can be true. We can be supportive, accepting, and understanding of their choice, and we still have our feelings, which are also valid, which is
Absolutely.
That's life.
That's it. That's big, grown-up stuff.
That's big grown-up stuff for sure. So we're actually getting to the end. Have we had our cat conversation? Because I think that's a good thing to leave off on. I have a question from my mother. How many cats is too many cats?
Well, when we had, I'm mixed up now if there are 12 or 15 cats in our backyard. They're living in
This is true.
we're keeping them all. Most of them were totally wild. And it was lovely. And I think one of my neighbors wanted to go to City Hall to denounce me and get me to prison for it. But we did manage with them. So I didn't think it was too much. So I'll throw in the number 12.
12. It's the age-old question. How many cats is too many cats? So.
How many cats is too many? No, there's no such thing as too many cats.
0. Yep. My sister says 0. My sister did not get the gene passed down with the animal loving, but she's a good person otherwise.
Yeah.
And also for dog people, I also love dogs. If I see our street, people walk dogs all the time because we are a side street. And if there is a parent with a baby and a dog, where am I going to go first?
I mean, come on, no brainer.
Dog.
Yeah.
Straight to the dog.
I can sit and have a half-hour conversation with a cat, no problem. Like, we can just hang out for half an hour, having like a good time. If you give me a baby, I don't know. I don't know what to do. So anyway, we're all wired a little differently, and I think that's okay.
Exactly.
I'm gonna throw it back to Siobhan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love to, we're wrapping up here. I mean, I think I would love to, raise our coffee cup to all the beautiful cats in the film who give us, a gorgeous, wonderful cutaways and allow us to be crazy cat ladies if that's what we want to be. Nothing crazy about it. However you want to make your family, with furries, with humans, follow your truth, and may you have good health care. Let's hope for that. And I also would love to take this time to also thank our beautiful another guardian angel who helped usher this film through the wonderful Canadian brilliant mind of Anne Kingston. Raise a glass to Anne. Thank you for all your brilliant wisdom and past while we were cutting this film, and it's totally tragic, and yet she gave us so much and left us with so many wise words and hysterical comments, and we hope to honor her with this film. Yes. She was an early supporter and really, really, really encouraged Theresa to make this movie. So thank you, Anne.
Yes, and if you watched all the way to the end of the film, you can watch her tell me to fuck off. When I asked her why she should, when I tell her she should get a cat. So to the end, I wanted to honor her and her memory, but mostly just her amazing friendship and support. So thank you, Anne.
Thank you,
I
Anne.
just want to address Andrea, who left a message here that after me talking about cats and dogs, that I do love Bradley and Jordan, our grandchildren. And Andrea, I love them so much you can't even believe it. Yes,
Me too.
much
We
better.
all love
than
Bradley and Jordan.
put together.
Me too.
Siobhan, are we ready to wrap up, or have you got more? I don't want to.
I think we're good. Yeah. Is there anything I'm forgetting? Probably, but yeah. Let's out. Any final thoughts here? Anybody that would want to send us out, or did we do that already?
Yeah, please put your final thoughts in the chat if you have some, and I'm going to just sort of close this out. This is very bittersweet. We have so loved sharing the film with everybody for the last 21 days. You don't know how much it's meant to be able to share it so widely. So thank you so much for being such an incredible audience, and for being an audience for these talks as well. You have one more day. Streaming ends Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern time. I really want to thank Siobhan, who's just wonderful. And if I make another film, Siobhan, you are my first phone call. And thanks to my mother. I don't even have words. Thank you. Just thank you. I want to let you all know that we've recorded all of our filmmaker conversations. You can find links to them at myselfishlife.com. You can find a lot of other fabulous things at our website, myselfishlife.com. Please come and visit. And again, if you are at a school, a nonprofit, a company, and want to talk about possibly bringing the film there, you can also contact me directly at myselfishlife.com. So from all of us, I want to say thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.